This topic is growing economies, chapter 22. So when we talk about what is an economy itself, an economy is a state at which a country or region is in terms of production, consumption, and the supply of money. So the level at which a country is, how we can say, oh, this country is at this stage of production, this country is at this stage of consumption. The supply of money in this country, this is how it is. That is what an economy is about. Then, here I go. The economy applies to the state of a country or region in terms of what is being produced, what is being consumed, and supply of money. So immediately you have to go to characteristics of different economies and their stages of development. Here I wrote, development deals with welfare and prosperity within an economy. So some countries have better experience in terms of comfort, education, and better health. So in contrast, large numbers of people struggle to gain enough food, safe accommodation, and clean water. So an economy, when we talk about economy, we're talking about the different stages at which their development is at. So when we talk about their development in terms of the stage they have, it means or it implies that we're talking about the prosperity and their welfare, how comfortable they are in that country, how uncomfortable they are in that country. So this is what we call stages of development. Then we're going to the different types of economies we have. We have developed economies, we have developing economies, and emerging economies. So let's start with developed economies. What is a developed economy? So I wrote here, developed economies. These are economies with high level of economic activity and better human development. So an economy will be considered developed if it is in a very high level of economic activity. That means in terms of what they produce in that country, in terms of the consumption in that country, in terms of the production in that country, in terms of the human development index of that country. So if it is so high, then the country will be considered as a developed economy. So what are the characteristics that will make us to know that, oh, a country is a developed one? Number one, high income levels. For high income levels, I wrote, they have high income per capita. According to the World Bank, any country with income per capita of 12,476 or more is to be considered as a developed economy. So a country will be seen as developed economy if it has a high income per capita, which is the measurement of your GDP divided by the total population. So here we go. The second characteristic of a developed economy is high literacy rate. Here I wrote, they have larger proportion of those who can read and write. So a country can be considered as a developed economy if the large proportion of its population can read and write. Then the third one, high life expectancy. So here we're talking about the age at which they are supposed to live, they are expected to live. So for high life expectancy, I wrote, they're expected to live for over 60 years and above. So a country that is developed would have a high tendency of living longer than countries with less development. The fourth one, good infrastructure. So when we talk about infrastructure, we're talking about access to schools, access to roads, access to healthcare, access to welfare support. Developed economies, they have all these accessibilities. The fifth one, highly industrialized. So I wrote, they rely heavily on the tertiary sector than primary sector. So for a country to be considered as highly developed or a developed economy, it will have its highest proportion of employment in the tertiary sector. Then we go to the next one, low levels of unemployment. Most of the people in the developed economies can find work. That means in a developed economy, a country will be considered as developed if most of the people in that economy are able to get unemployment. Then we go to developing economies. What are developing economies? So here I wrote, these are economies with a low human development index and less economic growth and low per capita income. So a country is seen as developing if it has low level of income per capita, low level of economic growth, and low human development index. So what are the characteristics that we see in a developing economy? Number one, low income levels. So when we talk about low income levels, we're talking about the income per capita in such economy. I wrote, they have low income per capita around $1,025 or less. So a country will be considered as less developed or as a developing economy if its income per capita is within $1,025 or less than that. Two, low literacy rate. When we talk about low literacy rate, in some developing countries, here I wrote, they have small proportion of their population who can read or write, as they don't have access to education. So they have low literacy rate, which means the vast majority of their population cannot read or write because they don't have enough resources to educate their population. That's another characteristic of a developing economy. The next one is the low life expectancy. For low life expectancy, I wrote, people in developing countries are not expected to live longer than those of developed economies. That means they are not expected to live longer than those in developed economies, which can be as a result of accessibility to healthcare, good education, and the rest. The next one, poor infrastructure. So when you talk about poor infrastructure, yeah, roads. Developing countries lack road, railways, networks, schools, hospitals, and production facilities, such as factories. So they don't have these things. So lack of infrastructure is hindering their development. That's about poor infrastructure. The next one is reliance on the primary sector. In developing economies, their largest population, the largest proportion of their population relies or are employed in the primary sector. So they rely on the primary sector of the economy. That makes us think that, oh, this country is a developing economy. The next one is, and they do more of imports for their finished products. So they are considered countries that does more of imports, or countries that do more of imports for finished products and more of export of their raw materials will be considered as a developing economy. It means they cannot convert their raw materials in their country. They don't have the secondary sector. Then the next one is high unemployment. There tend to be few employment opportunities in developing countries. So in developing countries, employment opportunities is rare. They don't really have opportunities for job. Then the next one is high population growth. They have high population growth rate because in such economy, they don't have access to, they are not literate. So they lack a lot of information regarding birth, regarding even death, regarding healthcare. So it becomes difficult for them to manage their population. The next one is emerging economies. When we talk about emerging economies, we're talking about economies with rapid economic growth. We're talking about countries that have the tendency of growing significantly. So we call it rapid economic growth. So what are those things that makes a country to be emerging economies? Number one, increase in average incomes in the middle class will continue to expand. In such countries, their middle class, their income continues to rise and expand. So two, continuous demand for both local and imported goods and services. In such economy, there's always an increase in demand for import and exports of goods and services. So we have two emerging economies. We have the BRICS and the MICS. For the BRICS, we're talking about Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They are emerging economies under the BRICS. Then we have the MICS, where we have Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. So that's how emerging economies is being grouped. We have the BRICS and the MICS. Then we go into growing economic power of Asia, Africa, and other parts of the world. So yeah, I wrote, most of the BRICS and MENT countries have experienced strong growth over the past few years, as their GDP have really grown. Also, they have created big international companies, which are challenging the dominance of firms from developed regions. The BRICS and the MENT countries have really witnessed significant growth in their industrialization. As a result, they are able to increase their GDP, which has also helped them to start rivaling developed countries that has huge firms. Now, there are bigger firms in countries like Brazil, in countries like South Africa, in countries like Nigeria, that they are producing almost the same products like developed economies. Now they can compete with developed economies. That is what growing economic power is talking about here. So countries in Asia and Africa have started competing with industries, firms in developed economies. So what are the implications of economic growth for individuals and businesses? Here I wrote, in emerging economies, consumer tends to buy more goods and services. This may make the emerging markets more attractive. As a result, creates trade opportunities and change existing employment patterns. With development, with economic growth, two things are going to happen. When the economy is growing, there will be trade opportunities, and the employment pattern in that country or employment patterns in that country will also change. So we start with trade opportunities. When I talk about trade opportunities, here I wrote, as an economy grows, consumption may also grow, which means businesses will continue to earn more revenue and profit. As a result, will increase both import and export. If there's economic growth, it means businesses will start making more revenues. As a result, they will start increasing their profits too, which also implies that employment opportunities will be available. And before you even talk about employment opportunities, it also meant that such businesses would have access to trade relationship with other countries. They will be able to import and export their goods, which might also likely increase the disposable income of citizens in such country. Then, if the disposable income increases in such country, the purchasing power of individuals in such country will rise, which as a result will lead to an increase in sales and profits for businesses, which would also help them to deal with other countries in terms of trade relationship. Then, for employment patterns, as the economy is growing, jobs will also be made available, which means countries that have high unemployment rates will start having low unemployment rate, or will start witnessing increase in employment opportunity. So here I wrote, unemployment and employment rate varies with countries. Measuring the employment rate within an economy will give an idea of the jobs that have been gained or lost across an economy. So countries will be able to measure their employment rate. And if they are able to do that, it will tell them, they will be able to know what has been gained in terms of employment, what has been lost in terms of employment. That's about employment patterns and trade opportunities. So here we're talking about the implication of growth in an economy. There are trade opportunities and employment patterns, changes in employment patterns. That's about that. Then we go to growing economic, okay, then we go to indicators of growth. When I talk about indicators of growth, a business must be able to recognize where an economy is likely to grow to find trade opportunities and investment. There are many indicators that we need to put into consideration. But what is certain is this: for a business, it needs to understand the potential growth in a given economy before it starts investing in such economy, or before it starts thinking about trade opportunities in such economy. So what are those indicators? What are those things a business should look into when it wants to invest or seek for trade opportunities in an economy? Number one, GDP per capita. Yeah, this is for GDP per capita is a measurement of economic activity, which includes all the goods and services produced in a year, divided by the number of people in such country. So And a business should think about the GDP per capita in a country or in an economy before it starts thinking of investing in such country or before seeking for trade opportunities. And how do we measure the GDP per capita? It is measured as the GDP divided by the total number of population in such country. So the Human Development Index. When you talk about Human Development Index, it combines statistics on life expectancy, education, and income for any particular country into a single rankable value. So we're talking about the life expectancy in the country, we're talking about the educational level in that country, we're talking about the level of income in such country. When we're able to put them in a single rankable value, that is what Human Development Index is. Then we take it one at a time. We have life expectancy. When we talk about life expectancy, we're talking about the average number of years a person can expect to live in that country. We're talking about mean years of schooling. For mean years of schooling, this helps us to assess the average amount of education a 25-year-old might have had in such a country. It's also part of Human Development Index. Then we have the last one, gross national income per capita, GNI. So this is the calculation. This calculation illustrates the relative wealth of the population. So we need to understand the wealth of the population. We need to understand the GDP per capita of that country. We need to understand the Human Development Index in that country before we say, oh yeah, we have to invest in this country, or we need to seek trade relationship in this country. So that's all about economic development, developing economies, developed economies, and emerging economies under globalization. So if there's any question, you can send me a message. Thank you. So that's Growing Economies.